Hello class. So we're going to start getting into coloring techniques, so I wanted to show you some examples of student work from previous semesters. Now, the techniques I'm going to show you can be applied to get these results. The key is the amount of time that you spend working on it. Now, I'm not going to spend 20 hours recording a 20-hour video so that you can watch 20 hours of me slowly coloring things. That's not going to work. I'm going to show you small examples of coloring techniques that can be applied to larger images, which is what these students did. So keep in mind that what I show you can be applied to get these results. It just takes time. So let's take a look at how this assignment's going to work. You're going to need to create and find or take a photo. So make sure you own the copyright to it or it's copyright free. And here's the original. If it's black and white, that's fine. If it's not black and white, that's fine as well. You're going to apply the black and white filter to it if it's in color. If it's not in color, don't worry about that. But you'll also want to do any leveling procedures, curves procedures, applying dummy overlay layers, all that stuff at this point to get a good black and white image. Now, if you already had a black and white image, you're probably still going to want to do things like curves and levels and all that. So go ahead and take your time to do that on the photo that's called black and white. So it's perfectly all right to have a black and white photo and then a black and white photo with higher contrast. That's cool. From there, you're going to create a new file and you're going to sit down and colorize it. So let's take a look at the work that these students did. I was very impressed by this one. He said it took a little over 20 hours to get this done. You can see the work put into the dog. Now, if you don't have that kind of time, I'm going to make a few recommendations. Avoid feathers, avoid fur, avoid hair, and avoid skin tones. Those are some of the hardest things to colorize, and you'll find yourself spending a massive amount of time on it. If you're really crunched for time, you'll want to have images that are fairly cropped down to one interesting element. For example, if this dog was on a carpet with a white wall behind him, that would be perfect for someone crunched for time, because they could work on just the dog. However, the dog, again, may not be the best choice if you're crunched for time because of the fur. It can take a long time to get in there and get the right blurring effects done. And you can see that there are a few missteps, even with the amount of time that was spent on it, a few bleeds and things. But look at this background. Look at all the coloring that was spent on this. All the time that went into this was very well spent. I think that it had an excellent effect on the overall image. And again, here's the original. Here's the recolored version. Okay, let's take a look at a few more before we get into the techniques. Sure. All right, I think that this is a good example. This is about the level that most people will be getting to. And I also picked this because there is one mistake. This student forgot to apply the smart filters to this. I only want one layer, so what you need to do is come in here and just rasterize this layer so that you have the black and white. Don't forget to name these as well. You don't need to have any smart objects, so go ahead and rasterize anything when you're done to turn it in. So that was the one mistake. In here, he or she, I don't remember who did this, went ahead and did a black and white procedure to it, and then afterwards did some very vivid colors, which I thought were a lot of fun. It worked well in this technique because of the type of material that the balloon is. They also went ahead and did some lighting effects to try to get that lens flare going on well. This, I think, is one of the best ones. Here's the original. Here's the black and white. Here's the finished work. Skin tones are incredibly hard to pull off, and you'll see that part of the way that this was done was in multiple passes. Essentially, it was around 4 different colors, I believe. There were red oranges, pinks, some gray greens, if we come in here and take a sample. Actually, it was mostly orange, I'm sorry. I thought there were some greens in the shadows, so I must be misremembering. The whole thing takes a massive amount of time to get skin tones done well, and I think that this student did an absolutely phenomenal job. You'll notice that they used blurring techniques to their full advantage. They selected an out of focus background image, and then when they colored it, they used large soft brushes and then slightly harder brushes around the edges in order to create the effect that they needed. The material on the sleeves, on the dress, it's also exceptionally well done. There are a couple of missed points that happens occasionally. You know, what can you say? Overall, this is absolutely phenomenal work. Again, I'm just going to grab the color picker and show you that the majority of the skin tones are in the orange. And this is true for most people, but look at all of these colors. They didn't just sit down and pick one color and go over everything. They used a massive number of oranges, and they built up very slowly over time. This was another project that took a long time. Let's go ahead and look at a few more. Now, this one I think was working out exceptionally well. What I was impressed with was how they got the blurred effect going in. There was one place where it fell apart. If I remember correctly, they missed an egg. They went back in very quickly and did the one egg there. But the rest of the eggs, I feel, turned out very well. It would have been good to have some reflected light in this so that some more colors from one egg would bounce into another egg. That would have really just topped this assignment. But you can see that the original were these lovely brown eggs, then a black and white effect, and then voila, Easter eggs. Now, heads up on that, this last layer at the top is named color fill, but it should be named colorize, so watch out for that. I do want these layers named correctly. I do want only 3 layers in the file you turn in. I would highly recommend you keep the original, though, in case you need to come back to it for some reason later. Let's go ahead and move on. Here's another example of an absolutely phenomenal job with skin tones. If we come in here, we can take another look and we'll see yet again. This one's more in the red zones, but it worked out quite well. Some pinks. I think that oranges tend to work better for skin tones, but this pulled off quite nicely. Watch out again for strands of hair. Hair can be quite difficult because little strands can take a lot of time. You'll want to refer back to the earlier videos on masking hair in order to approach this carefully. Time kind of ran short, and so there's a bit of an error in some of the background elements, but again, hard to notice because of the amazing job coloring the figure in the foreground. Here's another figure. Again, these impress me because of how incredibly hard they are, so you may not want to go this path. The hair strands, the smoke, which was built up slowly, the skin tones, and I believe this time it was more of a yellow-orange going in. And again, you can see how many different tones are used in the skin. It's not just one pass. That's going to be important if you, for some reason, choose to do skin. But again, if you're at all crunched for time, don't do that. Here's the original. Here's the black and white. And here's the colorized version. Please note that all of these layers are in normal mode. I don't want any of these layers in anything other than normal mode. There'll be 3 normal layers. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. I think that this one worked out quite well. There could have been a little more time spent in the background elements, but when you run out of time, you run out of time. And I think that the lizard was done exceptionally well. Here's the original, here's the black and white, and here's the recolored version. I think that this was absolutely on the right path. A little more time on this log would have been good, but this lizard is very well done. Let's go ahead and move on. Again, this is subdued, but this worked out quite nicely. Here's the original image. When they processed it, they caused a slight posterization effect, and they were just using the black and white tool to do that, but it applied quite nicely when they colorized it. You can see that they left on purpose some areas gray. Be careful with that. If you do it, it really has to be clear that you did it on purpose. If it at all looks like it was something that got missed, I'm going to think that you did it wrong. But in this case, it was done quite well. You can see again, soft brushes for the background, hard brushes for the foreground. A lot of masking was put into this to get the colors exactly right. Very good job. Here's another fantastic example. Here's the original vehicle. Here's the black and white version that's had all of its effects done to it. You'll notice that some of the lighter areas, the white areas, have been made just a little darker. And the reason for that is that white doesn't accept color. So you'll have to tint it or add something a little bit darker on top of it later in order to get it working. Now, what really impressed me in this one is just the work that was done in the reflections to really make this look realistic. Look at all the color tones that were placed in here in order to give it an authentic tinted effect. I think that this is an excellent work. And then in the background, just slight touches with a brush allowed them to create an effect as though the entire image was in fact in color from the beginning, when the image that they worked from was in fact from black and white. You can see that they took some of their cues from the original. They simply re-referenced it many, many times when they went through. So another excellent job. Show you just a couple more. Here's another car. You'll notice that they started running out of time in the background, and that's perfectly acceptable, but they still did a marvelous job getting some tonality in these plants. I was very impressed with that. You'll see that some of the leaves started to be left gray simply because there is time limits on these. Eventually you have to turn them in. In this case, they were able to do just a solid red, and you'll notice as compared to the previous image where the reflections had multiple colors, they were able to get away with just a red. They were also able to get away using just chrome, so they didn't have any color reflected in it, but it may be a good idea to put some reflected colors in reflective objects so that, like in this bumper, so that it will feel a little more real. The window reflections were exceptionally well done again. I believe they ran out of time when it came to the hood, but overall I think that this is an excellent piece. Here's the original, here's the black and white, and here's the recoloring. And between the original and the recoloring, you can see that some details got missed in the chrome, but I still feel as though they did an excellent job. Let's go ahead and move on. Now I wanted to show this one as well. It's a good example for a lot of reasons. The original was in black and white. They did some adjustments to it in order to get to an effect that they wanted. And when they recolored it, they didn't feel the need to make a realistic coloring, just a good job coloring. And you can see that they picked some fantastic tones and colors in here, and they just had a lot of fun with it. They also did some effects to get a texture. They were using different filters to get that. They also did a wonderful job on the whiskers. I think that those are very impressive. It's difficult to get long, thin strands. Frequently, you'll need to do semi-transparent brush strokes over them in order to get it exactly right. It can be quite difficult. Sometimes you'll end up going to the channels in order to build a mask out of certain areas. Notice how white this is and how dark the background is. You could come in with a brush set to overlay, and you could simply set this to a darker color. And then when you come in on the brush, you could, let me copy this. You'd really need to do this as a mask. Here we go, paste that in. Here we go. You could come in with the brush. It's a mask now. And you can use that overlay to track down the whiskers. Once you've done that, you'll be able to mask it more easily, and you'll be able to target those for specific coloring effects, which is what they most likely did to get these beautiful whisker tones. So this is another very good job. I'm not a big fan of the dots. I feel as though those could have been blended in a little more neatly, much like they did with the stripes up here. But otherwise, I think that this is very whimsical, very well executed. Let's take a look at one more. This is, I think, absolutely gorgeous work. Here's the original. Here's the black and white. And I believe he said that it was 18 hours of coloring, and it was just multiple colors stroked in, a lot of reference to the original image to get the idea of how to color them. The background too should be pointed out how well these leaves are done. Because it was blurry, it gave him some leeway, but it still takes a lot of time. I think that this is an absolutely marvelous job. One slight accident, if I remember correctly, he left an eyedropper tool on here. You can see that he was referencing colors multiple times. Eyedroppers do have the ability to drop down these little icons for later reference. And we can see them. I think I always want to say it's under properties, but it's actually under info. It allows you to place down these little sticky bits. So it's important to remember to clean those up afterwards. And you can clear those out inside, I believe, the panel options. You can also use Control Alt and Shift for additional, and you can see those processes. And I want to say that the Alt key is how you get rid of those. Let's see. But in order to do that, that's right, you have to go, this is where it gets tricky, switch from the eyedropper tool to the color sampler tool. And that gives you the clear all option. That also gives you the Alt key option to get rid of them, which is something that he would have needed to do, and I missed. He would have needed to do to get rid of that. So watch out for those little cleanup bits. Also would have been good to have this named colorized, but otherwise amazing work. So I wanted to show you that these are the results you can get with the techniques that are going to be demonstrated. I'm not going to take an image all the way through to be colorized because that would take 14 to 20 hours, and I don't feel as though that would be useful for you. I think it's more useful to demonstrate a number of different techniques and then let you loose into the world to do them. So the next few videos will be coloring techniques and processes and different ways to handle things. Afterwards, I will have a video on how to set up the final project. Make sure you watch those before you start the project. It's not a final project, the assignment, the colorized assignment project, assignment 8. Make sure you watch those videos before you start. If you skip those videos, you may accidentally do the wrong thing and you may spend an entire day doing the wrong thing, and that would be terrible. Watch the videos on how to assemble the files so you know what you need to do. Come back and do it afterwards. All right, I'll see you in the next video.